Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jason Flame. Welcome to the Master Motivation Podcast. On today, January 23rd, 2023, and I can't not mention this, but January 23rd marks 30 years since the first date for my wife and I. So, shout out to Jackie, 30 years. We're awesome. Today, I have a great guest today, Boon Brown, who has been teaching martial arts since the 1980s. He earned his degrees in education and a master's in psychology. His system is based on his experience of earning several high-level black belts, as well as working in a psychiatric hospital, where he had hundreds of real-life self-defense situations. Today, he runs a very successful school with many affiliate schools who teach his system. He makes it clear, though, that we don't teach martial arts. It can't learn a thing. We teach people. And I love that. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
It's amazing to catch up with you again. We first met through the Maya Elite program, an amazing program that helped, I think, both of us take our schools to a totally different level. Can't thank Mike Metzger, Frank Silverman, Robbie Beard, the whole crew enough for what they've done for our schools. So we met way back then, and what I really loved about you, sir, was that you always asked some very great questions. You ask questions about why, and I watch you on social media, and I watch your posts, and they're very thought out. And I thought you'd make a great guest today to tell your story about how you got started in the martial arts, how you built your martial arts school, and what you're doing today.
I appreciate that. And it's funny because you talk about asking those questions. I look at videos from back before the pandemic, and I swear I'm still affected by COVID brain or vaccine brain or whatever. Those videos, I was so much smarter 4 years ago than I am today. But I appreciate that. I think it was probably 2004
Uh-huh.
was when we joined Maya, and it's funny to watch them grow too. I mean, Shane Tassel was one of us, and
That's
you
right.
were too. And
Yes,
then
sir.
next thing I know, you guys are consultants for them. That was amazing. So
Well, that was an amazing experience in my life to go from, a lot like in martial arts, to go from a student very passionate about the martial arts to becoming an instructor in the martial arts, and then becoming an instructor of instructors. And that's kind of the path that I took with my elite, as I became a client of the program and just found the passion to help other people learn how to do what I did and what they could do. And then I got the opportunity to teach other people to teach their staff on what to do. So I think that's just a cycle of learning as well.
yeah, I think so too. I was a lifeguard as a young man, and and I moved into education, and I started teaching swimming and teaching lifeguards. Everybody's like, "Don't you miss sitting on the beach and and helping people out there?" I'm like, I'm helping like 4 or 5 people a year out there, but by teaching people how to swim, I'm saving their lives. How many times? And just this, it is. You get to that point where it's like, what bigger thing can I do? How can I
Hmm.
affect the world in a bigger way?
Right,
Um,
right. No, absolutely. Well, let's first start out just kind of talking about how you got involved in martial arts. How did you find martial arts? What gave you that passion for training the martial arts?
I think we all have probably some really weird story that goes back, but I was born and raised in North Georgia, up in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, on a huge farm, 800 acres of forest land, probably 200 acres of pasture. And my dad would make these little wooden swords for me. He says, "I have no idea how you knew what a sword was, but you wanted one." And he made these little wooden ones. Today we call them wasters. And he goes, "You would break one, I'd make you another one." He said, "I finally got to a point where I was just making a bunch of them." And I'd run around the farm, killing, tall grass and small trees and stuff. But there was a point where it saved my life. I was probably 7, and every now and then somebody would take their dogs and leave them out in the woods when they were hunting and they were done. Maybe it was a dog they didn't love anymore or whatever. And a lot of people would dump them on the roadside out there, and those dogs would form little packs. And every now and then the farmers would all get together and hunt them down and catch them. Or hold on, or they'd kill them. This was the 60s and 70s. And one day I got where a bunch of those dogs were chasing me, and I was in the pasture. I was probably a quarter mile from woods, and I knew I wasn't going to make it, but I had that little wooden sword, and a dog came at me, and I was able to fend him off with that sword. Didn't hurt him, but then I was able to get to the woods, and and climb a tree. And then my dad came out and ran them off. But they would have torn me apart. There's no doubt about it. At that age, they were hunting me. And
Wow.
so and as I get a little older, my dad got me into fencing because that's what I was into. There was no Asian style martial arts in that region, and so in 1975, I guess 76, we moved to Florida, and I live in Bradenton. At the time, we moved to Anna Maria Island, and there was absolutely nothing out there. So I would practice out beside my house, and some older boys came by and saw me, and they invited me to a ninjutsu class. And I'm like, no, I'm not interested in that stuff. I'm more European style. And they're like, no,
Mhm.
seriously, come to it. And so, hey, there's Dana. And
Mhm.
so they invited me to come to this ninjutsu class, and through ninjutsu, I became interested in the Asian arts. And I got to meet Steve K. Hayes, and a couple of summers into that, I actually went to Japan and stayed nearby with Grandmaster Hatsumi for a little bit too. I got to work in his school for a couple of weeks, and so that was pretty cool. Um, but it got me interested in all martial arts. And so I saw that my ninjutsu class just wasn't going to cover as much as I wanted to. And I asked my instructor, I said, how do I go? Where do I go from here? And he said, you start teaching. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I want to train. And that's when I went to Japan. I figured there was more. And I remember asking Grandmaster Hatsumi, where do I go from here? He goes, now you start teach. I'm like, teach. Who wants to do that? I want to train. I was a
Uh-huh.
kid, and 16 years old. And so I got back here, and I began to notice that I was already attracting a lot of other neighborhood kids to me to play ball or to go fishing or to go sailing or whatever. And I was always teaching them martial arts moves too. And so I began to accept the fact that this was the direction this was going. And so I got into more of the Asian arts through Grandmaster Park. Chong Park, his father, Chung Soo Park,
Mhm.
taught in Sarasota. And so I trained with him until he moved to Fort Lauderdale. And then I trained with Grandmaster Cho, who was here in Bradenton. And then he moved to Sarasota,
Mhm.
and just kind of took off from there in Taekwondo and especially Hapkido. When I guess I was finishing up my bachelor's degree, and I went to work at the psych hospital as a recreational therapist. The recreational therapist that was there was a director of the hospital, so she couldn't do her job. So I was hired to do her job. I finished up
Mhm.
my bachelor's degree, and she said, "Why don't you continue on and get your master's degree? I'll help you." And I did. And as with most people who work in psych for very long, the burnout rate's really high. And so by the time I got my degree, I was done in the field. But while working there, I had hundreds of real altercations, and figured out pretty quickly that these are patients, and I'm a caregiver. I'm not going to be hitting and kicking them. So I used the grappling stuff from Hapkido more than anything.
Mhm.
And so and I like the idea of controlling people without hurting them, without making a bad situation worse. And so that's kind of what I teach now. Plus, unlike a lot of people who were in law enforcement or military or something like that, I didn't have a gun or a taser or dogs, and sometimes backup. And it was pretty frequent that I had more than one attacker. So I had to learn a lot of things that just weren't taught. And it gave me a perspective too. Like, I was watching somebody on Instagram do a grab defense for a double hand throat grab. And I'm like, man, that's really cool. But you just got kicked in the groin twice before you were able to pull that off,
Mhm.
because I've been there and I've seen it and felt it. I know what it's not going to work that way. They're not looking at it realistically, but it's cool. And so we still learn those things. So,
Yeah.
so now I've been teaching since, gosh, 82, I guess 83 is when I started running my own program in a school as an after school program, and then built my locations from there. Um, Took about a 7 year hiatus because I was running my school on the ground, and worked in IT for a while and did incredibly well with that. And that's where I met my wife. And when our son was on the way, I'm like, I do not want to be this guy sitting in a cube all day long. And my kid going, yeah,
Mhm.
my dad works with computers. I'm like, I'm going back to what I did before, and I'm going to do it right this time. And so, like, when I first did it, my school was called Sun Arts Fighting Academy, and I still have a lot of those students that are around that are still trained with me today and are still associated with me. But that school was really geared more towards teaching people how to fight. And I had
Hmm.
one lady ask me, she goes, "Why do you call it the Fighting Academy?" I said, "Well, because the Sunrise Ballet Academy name was already taken." And, and and this school, though, is Ancient Ways Martial Arts Academy, and it's focused more on what happens inside, fighting the internal battles as opposed to external ones. And so
Hmm.
that is kind of how that approach went. But when I started this school, I decided I wasn't going to run this one in the ground. I'm going to find somebody that's going to help me. My problem with my first school wasn't the school, it was me. I had an ego that believed that I could do no wrong and everybody else was wrong and I could do it better. And I just had no idea. And I was young and dumb. And so once I opened this school, first thing I did was I looked at all the people that were out there, and I'm like, there's Stephen Oliver, and there's John Graydon, and then there was this kind of new thing called Maya, and so we decided, my wife and I decided we were going to go to the Martial Arts Super Show. And while there, we went to I guess it wasn't called the Elite Seminar yet, but
Not,
it's
not
what they
yet.
call it now. And we sat there listening to Keith Scott and Mike Metzger. Keith Scott gave me a creepy feeling, but he wasn't wrong. There's a lot of stuff that he talked about that didn't suit me well as a business person, but he wasn't wrong. And I guess I feel the same way about Stephen Oliver and some of the others. But Mike Metzger seemed to me to be a super sincere martial artist, as well as a martial arts instructor, and as well as a guy who made really good sense business wise. You can't teach your martial art if you can't pay your rent, and you got to make money to make this work.
Hmm.
And that's where we are now. We
Yeah.
had a 500 $500,000 over $500,000 a year last year, and that's with one school. And so we're really super happy with the way things are going. We're in the process of moving again, um, and it's been, I guess we've been here about 7 years, and so we're going to a space that's more visible. We're known in the community, and so most of our students come find us. But
Hmm.
in the last ever since the pandemic ended, there's been 5,000 to 9,000 new people moving to our region per week. Those
Wow.
those people don't know us, and so yeah, they're all New Yorkers. They're all like, we don't, for this mask mandate thing, we're going down there. DeSantis doesn't do that, and so we're getting a lot of new people here. So we need to be visible again. So we've been in this invisible plaza in the back corner, an invisible spot for 7 years. It hasn't hurt us at all, but now it's probably is. So it's time to go
time
somewhere more visible.
Time to move. Time to move. Well, listen, I got a bunch of questions. I was writing things down as you were talking to kind of go
Okay,
back to.
shoot.
Um,
Yeah.
so Stephen K. Hayes, when I was a kid growing up, and I got the Black Belt magazine, like I used to be so in awe of Stephen K. Hayes and Master Matsumi. Um, just you started talking about that in training in Japan. Tell me, give us some insight to that and just some experience that you had while training there.
So my memory is affected by childhood epilepsy or the meds they had me on. I don't know which. So what I remember from Steve is actually very little. I've met him a few times, and that was it. But he was one of the guys that encouraged me to go train in Japan. And the Grandmaster Hatsumi's place at the time was uh, not as geared towards Westerners as it is today. Today, a lot of people come from the West to train there, and he's got good translation, although his English is pretty good. Um, but the experience of there's a place you can stay right down the road that they know you're there to train at Hatsumi's dojo, and
Mm,
so it's kind of interesting to have that experience and to be there and to train with those people. And the thing about ninjutsu, like here, my instructor doesn't want me to bring out his name right now. I don't know why, but he he had a lot of really really good students, but he had a whole lot of students that were comic book hero wannabes, and they weren't really all that serious. They would train a couple of times and they would stand there and you're like, hey, we're supposed to be keeping drilling this. And they're like, but we did it. We know it already. I'm like, no, you don't. You don't do it till you get it right. You do it till you no longer get it wrong. And those guys were impacting negatively my training. And that's why I looked elsewhere.
mm,
But there was a couple of them that were just absolutely amazing. This young man, Cy Pratt, who's older than me, I guess, but absolutely the guy could climb a tree upside down. I mean, literally do a handstand, walk up to a
uh,
tree, and climb that tree upside down. He was
uh,
amazing. I don't think he's doing that much anymore because he's got to be in over 60, but he's still just an incredible, human specimen, actually, and a really, really great guy. So,
Now, you talked about opening your school early on. I think you said it was 82, 83. At what age were you at that time, and what experience, I mean, what were you thinking, like, why am I opening a school? You talked a little bit about ego and some of the things that made you fail, which I want to get into in more detail. But what told you that that was the route you wanted to take?
honestly, I need to do something that's going to help me finish up school. And so I started doing the after school program at a couple of elementary schools. I did 2 days a week at one and 2 days a week at another one. And I undercharged. And I thought I was being so cool because I was charging less than the other guys. And
Mm,
my classes were literally 65 kids in a class. And it would be one of those things that it was overwhelming. And if I had charged correctly, like I know Mike Metzger did when he did the same thing, I would have been super successful in opening up my own location a lot sooner. But I was doing that, and my name was getting known around. And so a health club, a huge health club here in town, contacted me, West Bay Athletic Club. And they said, "Hey, we want to run classes here." And I'm like, "Sure, I'll do it." And that exploded with adults and teens. And so I had all this. I was running all over town doing these things, and I got really tired running all over town. And here on the west coast of Florida, there's only one direction for population to go, and that's to go east. And so everybody said, "Oh yeah, out east is going to explode, and you should open up a school there." And I did, and I was probably 10 years too early. But I had I don't know, probably 3,000 square feet. And all I did was go in and put down mats. I didn't paint, I didn't do anything. And I ran the classes, but I didn't stop doing my other stuff. But I was young enough to where it just didn't matter. But I knew, like, there was a guy that was teaching Gary. I remember his last name now, but he was teaching kung fu in town, and he was charging like $75 a month. And I'm like, wow, that's crazy expensive. Nobody has to pay that here. And the reality is, he was probably underpriced,
right,
and
right.
and I was undercutting him and killing myself at the same time. And then that location did, paid for itself. And I was living hand to mouth, and I had a little house that I had purchased by owner, and he was letting me, literally, I was paying rent. And at the end of it was a balloon mortgage, so sooner or later it was going to come due. And as it was getting close, I'm like, man, I got to do something more. And so I moved my location to a spot where Grandmaster Cho had been on 41, thinking, oh yeah, all my students are going to follow me here. And it was a 20-minute drive from one to the other. There's no way anybody was going to follow me. And so it was literally starting over. And I was just too stupid to know, I shouldn't have done that. And so starting all over, wasn't making it, and I was struggling. And then I had a friend whose dad worked for IBM, and he goes, I can set you up so that you're working days for me and you're working nights teaching your martial arts. And so I did that, and eventually got a job with a huge insurance company as one of their IT guys, making over $100,000. I kind of fell into it. I met the guy who hired me while inline skating. I taught inline skating on Saturday afternoons, and he's like, "Hey, why don't you come work for me?" And I'm like, "I did." And I kept trying to run my school at night, and finally, I just handed it over to one of my black belts and said, "You run this. I'm going to go do this instead." For a few years, and I guess 7 years later, I was back. But
Hmm.
in those 7 years, this happened. And don't take a break. And if I could say anything to Boone Brown of the 1990s, it would be, don't take a break, whatever you do, because you'll never catch back up. But by taking that break, though, I met my wife, and I've got two amazing kids that are young adults themselves now. Brennan, my son, actually helps teach here. And my daughter is a very artistic person. She does cake decorating, and she's also a second degree black belt and an absolute badass. And so
That's
it's
awesome.
been a long journey. So
It's pretty cool to watch your kids train. I have a almost 21, almost 18-year old within the next few weeks, literally, and just watching them train through our program. One of the things for me with my kids training, they totally changed how I taught and what I taught and how I looked at the whole process. How was that for you? Did that come into consideration as your kids were going through the program, making changes and making tweaks based on what you see as a parent? Because I remember being a young instructor, talk about ego and all this stuff. I had parents that tell me, you'll see when you have kids, you'll understand. And I was like, yeah, 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 whatever. And they were all right. There were so many things that I
Yep.
just didn't see through those eyes. So walk me through some of that experience.
And it's one of those things where it's like, not only did I go, yep, and I agreed with them. I thought I knew what they meant, and I had no idea. and
Right.
and all of you that are listening, going, "Yep, I understand." You don't. It's gonna. You can. There's no other way to learn it but I experience. But it goes beyond just watching my kids and making those adjustments to the way that I teach and what I teach to better them. But it also is with me. I'm nearly 60 years old and I can still do, you know, probably 20, 25 tornado kicks in a day. But I'm not doing kip ups anymore. I'm not doing, a lot of, back handsprings or front handsprings anymore. There's things that I thought like, okay, in this particular move right here, you should be doing this. And now I look at it and I got a ton of students here that are in their 60s and 70s. And it's like, why would I ask them to do that? They're not going to do that in a fight. They can't do that safely in here. Whatever limitation they have, they're going to have that in a real altercation. So let's work around that. Let's teach them something that'll actually function for them. So instead of teaching them martial arts, we teach them. And it's the same with my kids. I mean, there's one of the things too. My kids were, my wife and I made sure, being an educator, I wanted them in a Montessori school. And there was only a couple of choices here, and I wasn't 100% happy with the Montessori school here, but it served our purposes very well. But it also gave them a more of a discipline to train themselves to step out of after class and practice. Whereas a lot of kids today, they're like, practice, 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 class is over, tablet. And
Hmm.
so it's definitely a different experience with mine just because of the Montessori approach. But I also noticed that being their dad and being their instructor wasn't going to work. And so early on, I had my instructors here be their teachers up until around probably seventh grade. They both came to me and they said, "Dad, we need to have a talk." And I'm like, "Oh God, what is this?" And they sat me down and they said, "We're ready to be your students." And we really like the guys that are teaching us, and but we're ready to learn from you. We know that, how much you give and how technical you are. And we want that. And so around seventh grade, they moved over to my program and my adult and teen classes, and they took off from there. There's still times when I have to say, Janelle, this is a yes sir moment. And just to boom, put the kibosh on any, but dad, that kind of thing. And so but yeah, they're amazing. And Brennan is absolutely. I started sword training with him when he was 2, and Janelle's more my bow staff girl. But Brennan, I swear we could probably put him in the Olympics in fencing, and he'd gold medal. He's absolutely incredible. He prefers kendo, but we do the Chambara version, like using the action flex swords, just because it's easier and cheaper. But he loves kendo and would love to compete in that. He's incredible. So, but yeah, it definitely changes your perspective. I remember my dad saying, he goes, when you have kids, your life's going to change completely. And I'd say, yeah, I understand. And I thought I did, and I didn't. And I don't think anybody really does until they get to that age.
Right. Right. Until you're going through it. Yeah, that's for sure. Well, you were talking about your first school and now in your second run at having a school, which is obviously a little bit longer than the first time. What are some failures that you've learned from, specifically, that maybe you could explain to someone else? We as teachers always try to help cut down the learning curve a little bit, but what were some specific things that you learned from running and operating a business that someone could benefit from?
So yeah, I mean, if I could go back and slap that kid around a little bit, I would say, quit teaching Taekwondo or martial arts. It can't learn a thing. Start teaching the people that are coming in and concentrate on your student services. You're not there for them to serve you or to hang on your every word and feed your ego. You're there to serve them. And in doing so, you're going to learn twice as much as they're ever going to learn from you. And I don't know that I would have listened at that age, but that's literally the truth, you know. And so when we have a new student come in, I mean, the first thing we do is we think about how are we going. This is their goal, and if it's a kid, it's just have fun, you know. But here's their parents' goal. If it's an adult, here's their goal. How can I help this particular individual get what they want out of their martial arts training? And what's the best facility I can provide for them that'll help them get that? What's the best training equipment I can provide that'll help them get that? What's the best way of teaching, because everybody learns differently, that I can
Hmm.
provide that's going to help them get that? And what's the way that this particular person learns? Are they an audible learner? Are they a visual learner? Are they a kinesthetic learner? What's going to have to change to make it so that I can serve them best? And
Hmm.
I think that that's really that mindset of service is something that I just didn't have it. And now that's like we have, you know, 4 staff meetings a week, and it's like, okay, what are you going to do to serve students today? You know, what are you going to do to serve the parents today? You know, and we go over all of that, and
Hmm.
it's crucial. It's crucial.
Yeah, I agree, and I love that you're talking about this. Um, how do you do that with a fairly larger school? How do you continue to teach that individual when you have classes that are so large?
So a lot of it has to do. I mean, something that I've done. The Maya talks about, hey, you got to have programs, you have Black Belt Club, Masters Club, and all that stuff. But and I never really. I always saw it as, oh, this is how they make more money off these people. And I didn't realize, no, this is one of the ways you break up those that are capable of learning at in this way. And this is how you break apart these people that are capable of learning this way. And
Hmm.
this is the ones you put here because this is their goal. And this is the ones you put here because this is their goal. And so um, I think that had a lot to do with it. But the other thing I noticed too is like when classes get big, we would put another class time in, and I don't do that anymore because the schedule's packed, you know. And
Hmm.
so instead, I'm like, this class has gotten big. We need 2 more instructors out there,
Right.
and and having 5 instructors on the floor for 40 students is fantastic. And we'll assign them and we'll say, hey, this is, like Miss Taya is one of our amazing instructors here. I'm like, Taya, these particular kids that you're getting, these 4 or 5, they're a bit in the autism spectrum, so make sure that you're making sure you keep that in mind as you work with them. And you've got them over here, and these are the drills that you're assigned for them today. Mr. Master Brennan, he's 4th degree now, super exciting. This is the group that you're working with, and they're very, very beginner, and they're terrified of you. They're terrified of each other. They're terrified of getting hurt. Make sure that they have an absolute blast and can't wait to come back. And so we focus on the different things in the same class with a variety of instructors, and it really helps to make sure that we have that mindset for the student and how we
Hmm.
serve them as individuals. They're still grouped. I mean, you can't. I mean, the only way to do them individually is do private lessons, which we do
Sure.
quite a few of. But it still can be done in a classroom setting. So
And a very important question as you're talking about adding, instructors or in any business, adding team members. Um, how do you develop your team in your school? Um, a lot of martial arts schools have a challenging time bringing people from the outside in. A lot are really focused on developing from within. What's your method of building your team so that you have those instructors on the floor with you?
well, I've got students that have been with me for 20 years, and so, or more than 20 years. So we start early. I mean, we start looking at them at Orange Belt, and we start to guide them if we feel like they're going to be good instructors. There's some
Mhm.
that I've had hopes for. They just never broke through the shyness. There's
Mhm.
others that really, really, really want to work for me, that are have a social awkwardness to them, and that can be trained, and the shyness can be too. And our leadership program tries to do that. And we have a really good leadership program. Most of it's based on Promac. Dave Kovar is a good friend of mine. I was with Promac for a lot of years. And so a lot of it's based on that. A lot of it's based on the Millennium training that Roland Osborne did prior to Hyper. And then a lot of it's based on the Maya and CMA stuff. And it's a it's there's so much that you can do in there. But like we went to instructor college for Maya CMA, I guess 6 months ago with Nick Peterman. Absolutely incredible. I got so much out of it. But that particular seminar was at this level. If you were a new instructor going in there, it was going to be way over your head. And I think that if I take my black belts and I work on something of really, really high level, they're going to love it. But I'm going to do them better service by working on stuff that is basic and then build up to it. And I think sometimes we're working at such a level, we see the world through black belt eyes. So we want to work at that level. I want to train at this level and I want to work
Hmm.
on these things. And that's not necessarily what they need. And so I think keeping the leadership program dumbed down, and I mean, I hate to say dumbed down, but keep it so that it's simplified. Praise, correct praise. Use the praise a bit. Make eye contact, appropriate touch, and say their name, and practice that. And practice that, just like you would practice your katas or your pumse, and make sure that the instructors are getting that, because you give it to them and you think they know it, but and they do until they don't.
Hmm.
And so I think keeping that simple is a big part of it. But yeah, I start looking at them, yellow and even orange belt. I'm like, where has this person got what it takes,
Hmm.
and is this somebody I'm going to want to help you know provide this service for our students? And in most cases, that's where I've gotten everybody from. And there's been times I think when I have hired out of pity, and it's never ended well. And I hope those of you that are out there looking at that one guy who's got a terrible job and he's a pretty good student and you're thinking about hiring him, I hope you're listening. Don't ever hire out of pity. You're not helping them and it's going to end up in resentment. Instead, hire the best person to serve your students, and look at it that way. Yeah, I've done it several times and it's always ended badly. And so
Right.
definitely, look at that.
Hiring out of convenience is only going to cause you inconvenience down the road. So that's
Good way of
definitely
putting it. Yeah.
word
Yeah.
to the wise on that. Um, yeah, you talk about Dave Kovar. Had him on this podcast, and I've followed him for many many years, and we use his exact leadership manual that we've used for many many years. It's great. We've got a 12-week course. It repeats itself every 3 months, and we're putting new people through it all the time. I just like you start young. I believe leadership can start really at any age and at any rank if they have the the personality to start right to jump right in there. But even if they don't have the personality, they have the desire to develop that personality to go to that next level. And even at the same time, when we put people through our leadership training program, they may not always come out of it to become an instructor. They're just learning how to use their voice. They're just learning how to stand up straight. They're learning how to look people in the eyes and shake hands and introduce themselves, which is going
Yes.
to benefit them down the line anyway.
Yeah, and so that's the other thing too about the leadership program is don't see it as employee development. I mean, it can be that. Some students they come in and they say this is their goal, and you can see, yeah, it's really more this. This is what they
Hmm.
really mean.
Hmm.
And if that's the case, and your leadership program is going to be what they need, then do that. And I've got one little girl, she's 11, and she's in her leadership program, and practicing teaching in front of the bigger people, all the adults and teens in there, not going to happen. But she's still getting so much by coming to these classes, getting
Hmm.
exposure to these amazing role models, and having the opportunity to hear how we use Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People is basically a whole lot of it. And getting her to hear that and getting her to practice a little of that really is getting her where she needs to be and getting her over some of the horrific abuse that she suffered in her life. And so
Hmm.
I don't sometimes I'll have somebody nominated for Black Belt Club and my instructors will be like, whoa, they're not ready. I'm like, no, but this is what they need. Remember,
Hmm.
we're not here to have them serve the Black Belt Club. We're here for the Black Belt Club to serve them, and this is what they need at this point in their life. And it reminds me of a story, if I may. I got a
Please.
minute. Okay,
Yes.
so this
We're here for
this kid
you.
comes, yeah, this kid comes in. is he's a maniac. He's straight F's at school. His mom's desperate, and so I signed him up. This was, oh, I don't know how many years ago, a lot of years ago. And
Mhm.
his name was Joshua, as they all are. And Josh was a madman. And my instructor came to me and he says, "You got to kick this kid out." I said, "No, you got to keep doing what we're doing." And I said, "Watch how I redirect him." I go over and I'm like, "Josh, hey man, I'm really looking forward to getting you your next belt rank. What's it going to take to do that?" And he'd be like, "I got to listen, I got to pay attention, and I've got to work hard." I'm like, "Great, give me a high five, let's do it." And for the rest of that class, he was good. And he goes, my instructor says, "But you got to do that every day." I said, "Yes, you do." And he goes,
That's
"How many
right.
times do I have to do it?" I said, "As many times as it's going to take." And so about 2 weeks later, he and my two other employees came to me and said, "We're going to quit if you don't kick him out." And I'm like, "Oh man, I'm really glad that you guys have each other to stand by each other and support each other and believe in each other." Um, and if that's the decision you're making, that's fine. I mean, you're welcome to change your mind if you like. But Josh doesn't have anybody like that, and so I'm going to be that for him, and he'll end up much better off because of it. At the end of that conversation, one of the girls is crying and she goes, "I didn't realize we were just abandoning him." I said, "Yeah, you guys aren't, you got to stand by him. You got to make sure that you're there for him. He's here for us to do exactly what we're doing, and we can help him." And within about 6 months, Josh is, straight B's and A's in school, doing really, really good. Mom is super excited about the progress we've made. The teachers are calling us and going, "What are you doing?" And my staff all said, "What did we do?" And I said, "You just did the program." And it's
Right.
it's recreational therapy. I'm a recreational therapist. That's what it is. I said, "You just did the program."
Hmm.
Unfortunately, mom said, "Hey, good, he's great now. Thank you. Bye. Thanks for the fish." Boom, they're gone off to
Oh
football or
man.
something else. No
Oh
telling
boy.
where Josh could have gone if he had stayed with it. But we still did what we said we were going to do. We still saved this kid's life because he was going to end up dead or in jail without us. And but it's a perfect example too of how your staff have to believe in the program, and they have to understand, if you're going to advertise you're going to help troubled kids, then you're going to help troubled kids and you're going to get them,
Right.
and that's a part of it.
Well, I think after many years of experience in teaching and just your background in psychology as well helps you understand this better. But I learned from just a lot of trial and error, a lot of what didn't work, and then found what did work and stuck with that. And some of our younger instructors, because I do have a pretty young staff. It's quite often that they don't see the impact that martial arts or just being a mentor, instructor, coach for someone, especially young people, but even adults need this as well. Just that constant support, that constant reinforcement. That, like you said, how many times are we going to do this until we don't have to do it anymore, right? I mean, and you just keep repeating the process, and the motivation leads to success. Success leads to confidence. Confidence brings you back to do it again, and if we can keep that going, I don't care if it's martial arts, if it's soccer, whatever it is, but that impact that we have when we're put in that position. Just some of these teenagers, they don't really see it. They don't see what that does for a child, and even if they felt it themselves, that's what's kind of surprising to me too. Is I will ask them, "Well, do you remember how many times I believed in you, and did you ever think that you were going to become an instructor?" Well, not really. Well, I knew you could. I saw that in you before you saw it in yourself, and now look at you. You need to now take that gift and give that to the next person. You need to see the gifts in other people, believe in them, and help bring them up. Because you never know. I mean, some of those most trouble kids, I mean, one of the most talkative kids I ever had became a head instructor here at my school. One of the most ADD, ADHD, whatever he was diagnosed with, couldn't pay attention for 2 seconds, ended up being a head instructor as well. And it's like, you can't judge that where they are now. You have to be able to look at where you know they can go, and again, that comes with a lot of experience. I haven't been teaching quite as long as you have, but you kind of start to see those signs, and it's just
And
kind of an
you
amazing thing overall.
Yeah, and you get to a point where you're almost like a Highlander. You've lived so long and you've seen so much, that it's like, "Oh yeah, I've had this kid before,"
Right.
as it was another person. But I had one mom come in once. She goes, "My kid's terribly autistic. I don't know if he's good for your class." And I pointed to the instructor and I go, "See that guy? Um, he is too." And it's like, and she's like, "But he's a grown man. He wasn't when he started. He was the same age as your kid, and
That's
now
right.
he's working for me." I mean, and they all think they're unique, and they are, but the reality is, I did this before. I can do it for you too. I've done it for 40 years. I probably might know a little bit about what I'm doing by now. And but yeah, and everybody, and the other thing too, I mean, like you and I are super attached to our students, but I was super attached to the ones that were here 22 years ago too. And
Uh-huh.
some of them are dead, but and that's kind of tough for me because it's like, where are these people going to be in the, in my lifetime as I move forward? They won't
Hmm.
all stay. I both know sooner or later everybody moves to something else. Most of them do, and or they pass away. I buried a black belt this month, and it's not fun, but definitely having this longevity gives you a very, very different viewpoint. Hindsight's way better than 2020, um,
Hmm.
but you definitely can see that, and I think it helps. Too. I get frustrated when the kids come in and go, "You don't understand what I'm feeling, or you don't understand what I'm going through," and it's like. There's a really good chance I do, but you can't say that because that discredits what they're feeling, and so you have
Right.
to approach it from more of a, why don't you tell me what you're feeling then, and why don't you try to
Right.
describe it to me, explain it to me, so that you can get through that stuff a little bit better.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and this is what Nita Cap, I believe. We become family in the karate school. The dojo ends up becoming our second home, and I mean, I can't tell you for myself as a young teenager. I could have gone on a very different path if I didn't stick with martial arts, especially in my teen years. I was not, my students might be surprised, my instructors might be surprised at if they knew kind of my background and where I was as a teenager. But man, martial arts, thank God, brought me over this direction. I haven't turned back since. I've been in martial arts and teaching martial arts since I made my black belt at 17. And the even though I had a great home life, I had two younger brothers, mom and dad. We did stuff together. Like things were good, but the studio always felt like that second home because of the reward system that was there with the belts, the camaraderie with the people that you train with. And I mean, when you spend that much time with just about anybody, you become just as close as any other family. And I think that that's also a culture that's built in some schools, because in some schools it feels like going to the gym. You check in, you check out, you do your thing, and that's it. But most of the people that I know and most of the people that I associate with feel that very same way. And I agree with you that, man, when people quit, it's still hard.
It
I'm in this a
hurts.
long time. It hurts because you feel like you poured a bit of yourself into that person, and 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 even though they probably didn't, or that's not what they think, it's like they just took what we gave them and went, bloop, and it went in the, you know, went in the trash. It just went away. Maybe that's not totally true, but that's how it feels
It didn't.
sometimes.
Yeah, and so I had when I was doing my traveling around teaching in different places, I had a group of boys, Larry, Tony, and Carlos, and they were foster kids in a foster home right near one of the elementary schools. I would go by, and they would jump in the back of my pickup truck, and they would help me teach at one of the elementary schools. Then they would go with me to the health club that I taught at, and they were, you know 12, 13, 14, I think, and they were not related to each other than through the foster home. And they were good boys, and they did this for 2 years, probably, or more, 3 years, um, and then when I shut down the program at Bashaw Elementary School, they weren't able to attend it as much anymore and gradually drifted away. Years pass, and I run into the guy that was the dad at the foster home. He worked for the local newspaper, and he goes, "Yeah, my ex-wife is right over there. This is at a big children's convention event." And he said, "You should go talk to her." And I went over and I introduced myself, and she hugged my neck, and she goes, "Oh, it's so good to see you." I said, "So what happened to his kids?" Which was the name of their their foster home. She goes, "Oh, well, we had to shut that down." And they had one boy, a toddler at the time, who was their real son, who ended up in like Manatee's Most Wanted. He was like in all kinds of trouble. And but then I asked her, I said, "How are Tony, Carlos, and Larry?" And she goes, "Oh, well, this one's dead, and that one's in jail. And the other one we don't know, but we think he's dead too." And she said it so casually, and she could see from the look on my face, it looked like it had hit me like, with a brick. And she goes, "Oh, it was that I didn't realize they meant that much to you." And I said, "Well, I kind of hoped that I made some impact on their lives, so that wouldn't be the end results." And she said something really profound. She goes, "Oh, you did make an impact on their lives when you were in their lives." And we like to think that somebody's going to build a statue or for us or whatever for the changes that we provide for people. But the reality is the impact that we make is the impact that we make right now. And if a student came in and said to you, "Hey, I don't care what you're teaching me now, I want that black belt." Yeah, we're a black belt school, but if you're focused on that, you're not focused on now. And I think that goes for us too. I think we really have to focus on right now. And even Hanshi Kovar, he's like, be present focused, focus on right now. And
Right.
so that lady taught me a valuable lesson that day. Don't think about the impact you're going to have on people's lives. Think of the impact you do have on people's lives.
Hmm.
And if it's impactful enough, it'll last. And if it's not, then that's okay too. You're still doing something great right now. And so that really made a difference for me.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful. I love thinking that way. Thanks for sharing that, and thanks for being on the show today. This has been a great conversation. Just kind of talking about some of the old times a little bit. There was one thing that you said that I wanted to go back to, and I'll just we'll end with this. Um, you talked about being in the program, in the Maya program, and some things that you learned made you feel strange or just did not vibe with you. um, can you explain what exactly that is? And I'm not looking for you to call out anybody, but because I think that it speaks to what you represent and the culture within your school. Because sometimes we will learn something from somebody, and that just doesn't gel with what we want to happen in our school. Right? Does that make sense?
So I think it is, it's like you have different personalities of your instructors who taught you and your instructors in your school. And some
Right.
students will connect with this instructor more or that one. And when I first started with Maya, there was a gentleman there named Keith Scott, who Keith is very, very, very smart and very, very business oriented. And it didn't give me a feel of someone who is A, as concerned about teaching great martial arts as I am, and B, although that I know today that's not true, it just felt that way, and that
Hmm.
he's also, um, he just gave me the feel he sees the people coming in his door as numbers,
Hmm.
not as people who are there for him to serve, and so I probably, if he had been the main guy at selling everything through I probably wouldn't have signed up. But when I met Mr. Metzger, I'm like, here's a guy who, I mean, I don't know what rank he is in BJJ today, but I mean, he trains every day, and
Uh huh.
and I know he puts in the hours. And prior to that, he was a great, taekwondoist. I mean, the name of his school was Internal Power. I mean, he understood it's not about the external; it's about the internal battles that we fight. But he gets it, and hearing him, occasionally he would say, "Hey, look, this guy's doing this thing and he's making a lot of money at it, but here's how you can do the other thing." Here's a perfect example. I had an after school program for 18 years. I hated it every day. You end up with parents who are just using you as a daycare. What do you mean you want me to come and watch my kid graduate? Can't you just do it while he's here? I mean, it's like so obnoxious. People showing up drunk to pick up their kids. We have to call somebody to come get them. Calling Child Protective Services because we noticed the kids got, marks on him and stuff like that. And finally, I asked Metzger, I said, "What do I, this is seductively lucrative. How do I get rid of this?" He goes, "Oh," and he sat down and he ran the numbers for me. And I realized that the amount of money that I was making in my after school program, although significant, could be made if I just made a single change, a single very small change to the way that we were offering our programs. And that was one of the greatest days of my life because he's like, now you are going to be able to do what at 2 o'clock every afternoon instead of sitting in a van picking up kids. I'm like, I don't know what. He goes, staff training. You're going to, and we do every day. We have instructor training at the time period when any competitors I have that are still in existence are sitting in a van line waiting to pick up kids. And it makes our students learn better. We saw this massive increase, not just in student quality, but in student satisfaction, as well as our satisfaction, as well as increase in enrollment from getting rid of our after school program. And I had no clue it was going to be so incredibly impactful. But I wouldn't have gotten this from somebody else. It was only Mr. Metzger who would have, been this blunt with me. He was, he's my
Hmm.
mentor. This is his job, but also to guide me through the process and make sure that I understood that, as seductively lucrative as it is, you're going to serve your students better by letting that go. And you're going to end up with more money in the long run for your business. And absolutely it did. So
Well, and that's
sorry,
exactly.
Dwayne Spires and those other guys that are out there trying to push the after school program. People, if
Well,
you
they're
need
listen.
information on how to get rid of it,
The,
let me know.
those guys are doing a great job, and there's definitely more ways than one to run the business. But what I loved
Absolutely.
that you said was, and that's why I asked the question about what made you feel awkward or what made you feel standoffish, is that yes, there can be some coaches out there that are touting the big numbers, and that's really what it comes down to is the numbers and the money. But what you said was serving your students at a higher level, and looking out for what your students benefit from it. And I think that speaks a lot about you as a person, just putting people before the other, right? And I think that's
And I
just
think
very
it's,
important.
I don't know if you guys do this, but at the end of our classes, we recite our code of honor: integrity,
Yes.
valor, justice, compassion, sacrifice. We have our own. And then I hear about a competitor here in town who you can go to him and say a particular keyword, and he'll step out of his studio, go to the van, and get a bag of pot for you. Now, I don't know how it is in California, but that's still illegal here. And yet, this is okay with his code of ethics. And I don't know. Maybe I'm too caught
Yeah.
up in my ethics, but maybe I'm self-righteous. I don't know. But the reality is, I would much rather live by the standards that we were raised by. Don't do anything that could hurt us physically or mentally. And that was a part of our student creed when we were kids.
Right.
My brain doesn't work as good as I want it to right now. Why would I do anything that makes that worse? But on top of that, if I'm going to set the example for my students, I've got to maintain that code of ethics. And so,
Well, I think that we can both agree that there's a lot of people out there doing things that just really don't make any sense at all, and are for lack of a better word, just absolutely horrible, right? I mean, we hear it all the time of things that happen in martial arts schools, but that's not us, and that's not who we surround ourselves with, and that's not how we're going to teach our children and our students to be. So, I think if we stay focused on what we do and doing the right thing, we're on the right path, and we can leave that other side alone. But hey, it's almost 1 hour today, and it's been a great time with you. So I appreciate you being
thank
on
you.
here and sharing your stories and experience and just all the lessons with us.
You need to do one of these where somebody's asking you all the questions, Jason, because you've got a lot to give here too. So,
Well,
all
I,
right.
I
Uh,
appreciate
oh,
that. Maybe one day I will. Maybe I'll turn the tables and I'll let someone interview me. But I'm having a great time interviewing everybody else.
you coming to Orlando in March?
I am not planning on it yet, but like I said, I've got three businesses here. I've got a lot going on. Just moved, amazing. So, oh, my wife says I'll do it. She's like, I'll go. My trip. Look at that. See, she's watching.
Yep,
Um,
yep.
yeah, I hadn't planned on it, but you never know. You never know. I did tell myself that I wanted to get back to going to some of the seminars again, and you know what I really miss? I really miss hanging out with all the people
That's
and
totally
and
it.
talking.
Yeah. I mean, they're not going to say anything we don't already know, right? It's just hanging out with
I don't
all
know.
the cool people. So, well,
Maybe there's
maybe, yeah, maybe.
still a lot to learn. Still a lot
There's
to learn
always
for sure
always a takeaway. Yeah, there's always a takeaway. All right.
every time. Well, hey,
Well,
thanks again. Thanks again. I appreciate you being on the show. Hang out
My
for about
pleasure,
60,
sir.
60 seconds. I'll be back after this video, and you and I have a quick little chat.
Sure.
All right, guys, that's it for today for Master Motivation. And tune in on Wednesday. I got Mr. Brendan Cleary, Brendan Divine Cleary, pro wrestler in SoCal. Can't wait to talk with him on Wednesday. And we got our Tuesday thoughts, our Thursday thoughts, and then on Friday, we got a special podcast host roundtable. I'll be talking with Mark Cox, Rick Rando, and Rafael Gomez on Friday. So stay tuned and make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. We'll see you guys all next time. Take care and make it a great day.